Hi folks, my name is Devok and welcome to the Artificers Guild, the home of all things Artifact. Today we see the return of the tier list. I've collected information from my own time in the beta, as well as the thoughts of some of Artifact's top players, so we can go over a rough outline for where each hero stands in the current meta as we look towards the launch of the game. So without further ado, let's get into my launch tier list. We're going to go through the heroes in their respective colours, starting with red, going through to blue, then black, and finally green. So, with red, we start with Axe, and immediately he goes into the S tier. Axe is a fantastic hero with a great body, 7 to 11. You absolutely cannot falter that, because it blocks all creep damage as well as doing insane damage himself, and is incredibly tanky. You virtually can always guarantee he's on the board. On top of that, his signature card, Berserker's Call, is actually fantastic as well. Being able to use your tanky red heroes, specifically Axe, to kill 3 units directly opposite him is absolutely fantastic. It can completely shut down the enemy's plans. Of course, it does require a bit of initiative, but if you've got it, you're good. We're going to have to go through a bit more quickly than we did last time because we've got a lot of heroes to cover, so sorry if they're not all quite as fleshed out as that one was. Moving on, we've got Beastmaster. I've got him in A. I actually think Beastmaster's quite good. He's sort of like a cheap, less reliable Axe, I guess. His stat line isn't quite as good. He's got more health, but less attack and no armor. He also brings a passive with him. He can summon a little boar that does 3 damage itself with 1 armor and 3 health, and continually removes the enemy's attack, which can make him more survivable. So he has got that sort of bruisery feel to him, and then his signature card is another sort of 3-person control effect. But instead of just letting you kill 3 enemies, it stuns the one immediately opposite you, and then pushes the unit either side of that stunned unit into random different lanes. Now, the randomness can really mess you up with this one, so you've got to be careful with the way you use it, and the enemy can definitely play around it by just making sure there isn't a unit in front of him. Axe can use Berserker's Call so long as, well, he can use it whenever really. He doesn't need an enemy directly opposite him, whereas Primal Roar needs an opposite enemy unit to cast on. Moving on to Bristleback, he's also in A. He doesn't really... Bristleback. How do we explain Bristleback? He doesn't have a big impact on the game unless you get the ball rolling. He's very, very snowbally, and he himself has no way of making that happen. He's a big, big risk to have. If you don't get him in a good lane, in a good spot where he can kill a hero, get the armor going, and then just become an absolute monster, then the enemy can largely ignore him. So, Bristleback, I think he's good, but he's not S. I put him in A. Viscous Nasal Goo, it never feels good to have 3 of them in your hand, whereas if you had 3 Berserker's Calls, you probably wouldn't mind. So yeah, Viscous Nasal Goo is good, but it's more for making sure you curve well. You've got 4 mana to spare in your red lane, just throw a Viscous Nasal Goo out on the enemy hero. That feels good. Having 3 of them in your hand, rather, that doesn't feel so good. Moving on, we've got Centaur Warrunner. I think he's a lot better than most people are looking at him. So Centaur Warrunner is a very risky hero. He's supposed to be bruisery, but he doesn't really have the stats to do so. And his card, Double Edge, most people view as just anti-red. So if you don't know, it does -8 armor and +8 attack to a red hero. So you can cast it on enemy red heroes to remove 8 armor, or on your own to give them 8 health, but both effects always apply. So it's a very risky card to use on yourself, and if you use it on the enemy, you basically have to follow up with some sort of control. However, the way I like using Centaur Warrunner is, especially as I don't currently have Axe in my collection, my sort of 5-minute win deck, which is a black-red aggro deck with Solar Khan, Storm Spirit, and normally it would have Axe. So I put Centaur Warrunner instead, and that extra 8 damage that you can apply for 1 mana has actually won me a couple of games, maybe like a turn earlier than I should have. So, and that's where the 5-minute win deck came from, the name rather. So, Centaur Warrunner, I don't think he's OP, but he is pretty decent in at least 1 deck, so B for me. Moving on, we've got Keith, and Keith, along with all bar 1 of the basic heroes, is in D. Yes, Keith and Farvan and Jamoy, they're not the worst heroes in the game, there are worse heroes, but they're definitely down there, so he stays down there. His signature card is abysmal. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Legion Commander is in S, because Legion Commander is freaking amazing. So her stats are kind of like a mini version of Axe, a little bit less attack, 1 less armor, a few less health. It does all start to add up, but her passive effectively gives her 8 damage to enemies that don't have armor. So she's great at fighting off big health enemies that don't have armor. So like Beastmaster, for example, or many of the green heroes with 4 attack and 10 health. She's really good at fighting them off. However, the real reason you like Legion Commander is because her signature card, Duel, is like Berserker's Call, but better, and only costs 2 mana. So yeah, Legion Commander, S tier for me. She's in basically all of my red decks. Mazzy is next on our list. I've got Mazzy in C. I like Mazzy. I think she's a good draft hero. Not necessarily a good draft hero. I had 2 of them in draft once, and I've seen people with 3 in draft. If you can stack Mazzies, then her signature card to give your tower armor is incredible. You can effectively ignore a lane, so long as you've got like 2 or 3 tower armor on it, because it'll be so slow for the enemy to take it down. But with just one Mazzy in like Constructed or something, he doesn't have that much of an effect. With just 6/3/6 as a stat line, especially suffering from piercing damage, which there is a lot of out there at the moment. Gets 2-shot by Lucent Beam. Like, there's just so many things that can go wrong for Mazzy, and all you're getting out of it is a bit of tower armor. So, C tier for me. Moving on to Pugna, equally on C tier. I personally freaking love Pugna. I love Netherward. I think it's a fantastic spell, or improvement rather. I just wish it was better. I just wish there was some sort of deck to build around it. And in future expansions there probably will be, so Pugna's C tier for now, but watch that space. Next up we've got Sven, the mighty Sven. He's in B for me at the moment. Sven is sort of the epitome of your average hero. He's good, his stat line's okay, he has cleave built into him, which is really nice against certain decks, but not all of them. You almost always want an Axe instead. He's like a version of Axe that you can run if you don't have Axe. I like running Centaur in some decks. If I don't have Axe and I'm running like a mid-range deck, maybe I'll run a Sven instead. Although usually I'll go for a Bristleback or a Beastmaster, but the option is there. Again, he suffers for the kind of weak signature card. Works well with him, but not well with many other red heroes. Tidehunter is next up, and he's also in B. Plenty of reds in B. His signature card is really good, okay? His ability is really good. His health, he has 18 health. That's ridiculous. So why is Tidehunter in B? Tidehunter is in B because none of that is really Red's thing. Red already has Fight Through the Pain, which gives you initiative for 1 mana, which is effectively what Krakenshell does. Red already has plenty of CC, which is effectively what his ability does. And then he just doesn't have very aggressive stats, and you're picking Red to be aggressive, right? That's the reason why Red spells suck, because you have so just good attack, armor, and health values. And all Tidehunter's got is health, and that's really not what you're looking for, so I think that's why he's not seeing much play. Maybe we see a deck that utilizes him in the future, but for now, not so much. Next up, we have Timbersaw. Timbersaw, also in B, a hero I really like playing. I really like Whirling Death, but it's just his passive. It feels so bad. If you don't know, his passive gives him +1 armor for every enemy that's attacking him. So that's at most 3 armor, but it's basically always 1 armor. And that's really not enough for a 4/0/11 stat line with Whirling Death, which is, I like it, but it's just a 2 mana effectively deal 2 and remove attack from the enemy. Temporarily remove attack from the enemy. So yes, Timbersaw is fun. Timbersaw is definitely fun. Let's just leave it at that. Timbersaw is fun. Moving on. Ursa, also in B. I have a deck that basically uses a lot of B tier heroes, which revolves around just removing stats from the enemy. I think it's hilarious. I don't know why. It's actually won me quite a few games, but other than that sort of stat removal deck, I don't see Ursa played. Unless it's someone that doesn't have a complete collection, I just do not see him played. He's probably quite good. He works really nicely with Cleave if you can get that on him, but other than that, you just won't see Ursa. But like I said, it's not that he's bad, he's just not as optimized as other heroes, so he's in B. Finally, we're done with red, so let's move on to blue. Crystal Maiden is first up, and she is equally in B. Crystal Maiden is in B, why do you ask? Because she basically only works in one deck, Mono Blue. Crystal Maiden in Mono Blue is a little bit ridiculous, because she just refunds so much mana, but other than that, her stat line is exceedingly weak, and her ability, or her signature card rather, isn't really overpowered, or it's not highly powered enough that she could rise up to A. So she's in B for me for now. Earthshaker I've got down in C, unfortunately. So his ability, Tidehunter does better. It stuns 3 units and Tidehunter can stun all units if he's lucky enough. And it's on a 4-turn cooldown, so you'll only ever get that off once. Okay, sometimes that ability can win you the game, but there are other abilities that could be winning you the game throughout. Then we get to Echo Slam. 7 mana, deal 1 damage to every unit for the number of units. So that's potentially game winning. You can easily clear an enemy board if they're really pushing you hard. My only gripe with it is that it's 7 mana, and for 6 mana, with blue you can use Annihilation, which kills all units on both sides, so you can just suicide a unit into do that. Or you can use Thunderstorm, which for 6 mana deals 4 damage to all units, which if they're going wide, they're most likely really small units, so 4 damage will kill them all anyway. Earthshaker, I think, his problem, aside from having, again, a very weak stat line, if he had a better stat line, I'd pick him up. But because he doesn't have a good stat line at all, his ability you can only ever use once, and you can just replace Echo Slam with other cards. I just don't see Earthshaker being played. He suffers a lot from going up against armor as well, which a lot of other blue cards do, so you can't even tech him in for that. So, sorry Earthshaker, not today. Jamoy the Wise, also down in D. He's probably the second worst of them, but no, he's probably the worst. I don't know. Jamoy's down. He's down in B. D rather. Kana, the only blue S tier. You'll notice that red had 2 S's and all the other colours have 1. It's a nice little balance there. So Kana S tier, why? Because she's got 12 freaking health and she offers one of the most consistent win conditions of a card that blue has. Prey on the Weak is just such an amazing ability. If you don't know, it summons a 2/1 Dire Wolf or Dire Hound or whatever they're called, sort of just basically a rubbish melee creep with 2 attack and 1 health for every damaged unit on that lane. So if you combo this with especially Ogre Magi's Ignite, which is an improvement that deals 1 piercing damage to all enemies, so that deals 1 piercing damage to all the enemies. If the enemy has a lot of units, they've probably been damaging your units, so you can see how this can start to spike out of control. You cast 2 of these in a lane, suddenly you're doing 30 plus damage, it just swings the entire game around. On top of that, she has 12 health, and she pulls units to her lane, so she combos well with herself, because you can guarantee you're having 2 melee creeps spawn in her lane every round, that can get damaged, that can then spawn more dogs. She's just absolutely insane. She's almost an auto-include in basically every blue deck, just because she brings a win condition in and of herself. Moving on to Luna, she makes a good argument for S, but she's in A. She can't stack up to Kana. You can drop Luna from your blue deck, and you won't really notice it too much. The good thing about Luna, and also Zeus, which we'll get onto later, they're blue's answers to armor. Luna is probably the better version with Eclipse, but you have to wait quite a while for that to come online, so Luna is just anti-armor, and you basically need her in your blue deck to make sure red doesn't walk all over you. Moving on, we have Meepo, and Meepo is down in D. Meepo sucks. Sorry guys. That's about all I can say about it. In future, he will probably be good. There will be an expansion that releases a card that does something ridiculous. If you've got lots of heroes, Meepo spawns lots of heroes, he will be ridiculous. For now, he is not ridiculous. He is a meme. Moving on. Ogre Magi, also in A. Basically, next to Kana is the staple of blue decks. He just helps blue do blue better. Ignite, like I said, works really well with Kana, but it also does some armor piercing, so it helps out with Luna and Zeus. And then just being able to, on a 25% chance, get to cast something again. If you're on mana turn 4, you've got 2 blue heroes out, you've got nothing but a Foresight in your hand. You throw down a Foresight in Ogre Magi's lane, it gets multicasted so you can cast it again. It just feels good. It's just very, very helpful. You don't necessarily even notice the 25%. You might be sat there crossing your fingers, but more often than not, it'll happen on cards you don't intend it to, and then that card will end up winning the game. So, just very, very nice, even if just to assist with blue's consistency. Moving on, we have Outworld Devourer, contender for the worst hero in the game. He is very bad. I actually like his signature card, but it doesn't quite do what you want it to do. Either have it stun and damage and be an aggressive card, or have it stun and heal, or just make damage immune for 1 turn and have it be a defensive card. I get the idea, it's supposed to be like it is in Dota, you can use it aggressively or defensively, it's a very versatile tool, but by having it be versatile in this manner, it just kinda sucks no matter which way you do it. So I've tried to make him work before. Oh, by the way, he's got a terrible, terrible stat line, and his effect is random and doesn't necessarily always happen. And even when it does happen, you haven't counted for it, and you can't count on it, so you don't really make use of it. Anyway, all in all, terribly optimized hero, probably the worst in the game. Moving on to Prelex. Yes, that is actually Prelex. The 2 creep heroes didn't have Dota icons, so I couldn't get the fancy ones. Anyway, she is in C, mainly because she's hard to utilize. If you don't know, you put her in a lane, and then kind of like Kana, but not. During the deployment phase, she'll spawn 1 melee creep. And then her signature improvement is 5 mana barracks, you place it in your lane, and it also spawns a creep in the deployment phase. She's a very win more card. On top of having a 3-5 stat line, she's very easy to kill, so she's basically just a bad Venomancer. Moving on to Skywrath Mage. I think Skywrath Mage is arguably the one blue hero that's on the bench. So you can almost always swap him in. He's decent in most blue decks. There are just probably other heroes you want, but if you don't have those, Skywrath's your man. Put him in most of your blue decks if you don't have one of the blue heroes that's really strong. Because Mystic Flare is the versatility that blue needed. It can deal 4 damage to 3 things, 6 damage to 2 things, or 12 damage to 1 thing. Oh, but Divok, you have to make sure they're perfectly lined up. You're playing blue. You can easily just move stuff around with Cunning Plan, or make sure something dies, set it up with a Ventriloquy, set it up with... You have plenty of options. On top of that, Concussive Shot helps blue deal with armor. It also just helps blue deal even more damage. Spike damage the enemy weren't kind of expecting, although they should have seen coming. So, all in all, he's just a great extra addition to your blue deck, and I think he can probably fight for his space with Zeus. Next up, we've got Venomancer. He's in B tier. Like I said before, he's just a slightly better version of Prelex. Venomancer summons a 1/0/3 banana, otherwise known as a Plague Ward, in his lane at the beginning of the turn. Now, Plague Wards at 1/3, you might say, well, they don't trade very nicely with creeps. Well, at the beginning of its deployment phase, so it has to be, you have to have Venomancer down 1 turn, then the next round he spawns it, and then the next round its effect triggers. The Plague Ward itself deals 2 piercing damage to a random enemy neighbour. So if you can get a bunch of these going, it's actually a pretty scary lane to be in, but it's another sort of win more card. Both of these are like bad Karnas, really. Mainly because they're just super low health and their signature card is just more of the same. Whereas Karna's signature card is more of the same but ridiculous. So his signature card summons 2 Plague Wards of 4 mana. You can start the Spiral out of control, but like I said, you've kind of got to be ahead already, otherwise the enemy is just going to clear away your pesky little 1/3s. Finally, we have Zeus in blue. He's in A, he's just a good stable blue hero. I think people look at Zeus and think they want to get rid of him out of their deck because he's not that good. Because Thunder Gods, sure it's okay, but it's only 4 damage, mana around 7. Stuff has got plenty of health by then. Honestly, it's his passive. His passive is really nice. Cast 1 blue spell, Zeus suddenly one-shots the melee creep in front of him. You can quite easily, at least at my level of play, make your enemy sort of miscalculate the amount of damage they can take because they don't imagine that you have 3 ventriloquies, so you can actually have 3 damage come from Zeus. Like, there's just extra stuff that you can do with that makes him a lot better than he seems initially. And 3/7 is a good stat line for blue. Moving on to black. Bloodseeker's our first hero here, and I've actually put him in C. I had him originally in D, but of the D heroes, he's probably one of the better ones. He can self-sustain himself really nicely, but you basically just want to make sure he's in front of enemy creeps, or weak enemy heroes. And his signature card feels pretty bad, but it's better than Rix's. So Rix's Silence is 5 mana, silence a unit. Bloodseeker's it's kind of like the OD thing, where it's 5 mana, silence a unit, and give it +4 attack. So it's versatile, but I like this versatility. Either you desperately need to silence an enemy hero, so +4 attack is fine, because whatever they were going to cast is a lot worse, or you don't need the hero or unit you're casting it on, and you get +4 damage. Sure, it's not permanent, so it's not great, but that's why he's in C. Bounty Hunter is next up. I've got him in A. He's just a good, strong black unit. Like, his gold generation is nice. I think Track is definitely easier to make use of than Payday. And if you get high rolls, 11 damage will kill most things, but you do kind of have to rely on that high roll, and then you've got to be playing a gold generation deck around him. He basically enables an archetype, but then he's also kind of useful in other archetypes, so that's why he's an A. Lich is next up, and Lich is the S tier for black. Lich is ridiculous. 5/9? That's pretty tanky for a black hero. On top of that, he has extra card draw with his ability, which I very rarely use it for card draw, but quite often you'll find that it's nice to be able to have the option to kill your own units. It means you can stop the enemy from using siege damage, if they've got like a red mist maul on a Crystal Maiden or something. When her base attack is less than her siege, it works for stuff like that. Cleave damage, it's really nice for stopping cleave damage. And things like Primal Roar, like we already spoke about. If you just sacrifice the unit in front of Beastmaster, he can't Primal Roar anymore. And then of course Chain Frost. Holy hell. Chain Frost is ridiculous. Deals 24 damage, but it's not necessarily randomly split. So you do 3 damage to the target you put it on, and then 7 times it'll bounce to a target either to the left or the right, and deal 3 more damage. It's not piercing, so that can mess you up, but it does grant you initiative. So it's got extra versatility, and you can just use it as an initiative card. It does a ridiculous amount of damage, and Lich himself is already a good card. I think this is probably the most rounded of the S tiers. Like, Lich is just good, full stop. Moving on, Lion. We've gone from riches to rags. Quite the opposite of what you want, really. Lion is in D and also contends for the worst tier in the game. There is one deck out there, one constructed deck that a friend of mine, Action Jackson, he claims Lion is good, and I will believe him because that man can build a deck. However, for the general purposes of draft and constructed, in normal decks, if you don't have 200 IQ, Lion is D tier. Necrophos, he's in C tier. Necrophos and Pugna are alike to me. I really wish they were good, but their signature cards feel too expensive for what they give you, because they really need to be able to ramp up, and you can't play them early enough. Well, by early enough, I mean you basically can't play them turn 1. If you could play them turn 1, they'd ramp well, but you can't, so they don't. Necrophos is basically only really good if you get a decent number of kills, then he gets tanky enough to compete with the likes of Lich for the Black's tankiest hero, and then he becomes decent at casting spells. But even then, you've only got Heartstopper Aura to cast, whereas if you had a Lich, you would have Chain Frost to cast. So maybe he's a poor man's Lich, but otherwise I'd just try and avoid him. Moving on to Phantom Assassin, she is, okay, now we've gone from rags to riches. Phantom Assassin is A tier, but she's borderline moving up. She is a common, but she appears in basically every black deck you'll ever see. She's great in hero killing decks, she's great in gold generation decks, she's great in control decks. You might not see her in aggro decks, because there are kind of better options, but some of those are rare, so you might see her in aggro decks too. Like, she's just good at many, many things. With 8 health, she's very tanky, and then with 6 health, but plus 4 versus heroes, she has a lot of damage versus the only thing you really care about killing. Coup de Grace is one of the only condemn cards in the game, so it goes straight through damage immunity, and it can just be effectively even more powerful than a silence. You just immediately kill the enemy you don't want. It is a little bit overrated, it does cost you 2 cards out of your hand, but if you're able to get a good enough effect out of it, it's definitely worth the cost. Moving on to Debbie, effectively mini Phantom Assassin. She is in C. She is easily the best of the basic heroes, because she effectively has 9 attack and 5 health. 5 health is a bit weak, but there are other black heroes with the same problems, so you've probably itemized or built around it. And then, her signature card, no accident, 3 mana, deal 3 damage. It doesn't feel bad. Quite often it's just, you lack that tiny bit of damage to finish off that melee creep so you can hit tower, or the enemy survived on just 1 health, or cheating death procced and they're surviving on 1 health. Just no accident them for 3 mana, maybe they'll die. Next up we've got Sniper, he's up in A tier, very very nice control hero, and as has been recently sort of shown to me by the likes of Mogwai actually, he's really in favour of this, he's a great black splash hero, because his signature card is cross lane. Any hero that has a cross-lane signature card that's also very, very powerful will be a great splash hero. So Sniper is great in a lot of scenarios. His body isn't fantastic, but honestly, you just put him out turn 5. He's your mana round 5 hero. Always, always, always. Okay, almost always, but 99% of the time, he'll be your final hero. He won't die as often, and you'll be getting closer to getting that assassinate out. Next up, we've got Solar Khan. She basically enables an entire archetype. Aggro is Solar Khan. Solar Khan is aggro. If you want to kill the enemy towers fast, you play Solar Khan. She does 12 damage to an enemy tower, 14 if you've got Assault Ladders, her signature card on her, which only costs 3 mana, so you can place it down early. She just destroys enemy towers. So if you build her in an early deck, she does exactly that. Next up, we have Storm Spirit. Storm Spirit I've put into B, because yes, Solar Khan enables an entire archetype, and Storm Spirit just kind of makes that better, but that's the only place I really see Storm Spirit ever played. So Storm Spirit's Ball Lightning is a 3 mana, just lets you move any black hero into any other available space across the board. It's fantastic for Solar Khan because you can make sure that she guarantees tower hits. However, that's kind of all he does. He then gets extra damage for every black card you cast, which in aggro decks you have lots of small casting spells, so you can really ramp up his attack and he can hit tower pretty hard. But you just don't see him in any other deck, and it's not that he enables that deck really, he just makes it a bit better. You can do without him, so he's in B. Tinker is next up, I've put him in A. I originally didn't like Tinker. I couldn't get the grasp of Tinker. I was just never very good at Tinker, but I've recently started playing a load of blue-black control, and my oh my is Tinker good. Okay, Tinker's pretty strong. When you put him out on turn 5, he still has a turn before you can use laser, which kind of feels bad. I wish it was piercing as well, but for 7 attack and 5 health, it's not that bad. But then you've got March of the Machines. There is nothing more fun than watching the enemy tower die to a March of Machines. It's basically a conflagration, but it only hits 3 times, and it hits the tower. But importantly, it's that and conflagration. You play them both, and then the enemy just cannot put creeps in a lane. They cannot put anything except for big, tanky, armor-busting heroes in lanes. I absolutely love having Tinker in my decks, especially my black control decks, so he's in A. Next up, and rounding up black, we have Winter Wyvern. Winter Wyvern is in B. Again, he's pretty good in those aggro decks, and he's kind of good in hero killer decks too, or she rather, but it's just that signature card, it just feels so awkward. Disarm the enemy, and then have its neighbours attack it. So either you're disarming it and making it weaker, so that it's easier for you to kill and they don't hit you back, but you're basically only getting one of those two things. Either you're disarming it, or you're killing it with units either side. It's like a bad version of Friendly Fire. If this was Friendly Fire's effect, which gets 2 enemies and makes them fight each other, that would actually be a lot better. I think I'd see Winter Wyvern played more, but it's not, and I think it's kind of a bad version of Friendly Fire. So you're in B. Finally, we're on to green, our last segment. Starting with Abaddon, he is in C, because he basically just survives. He's pretty decent in draft, because in draft, having the sort of optimal mobility and making sure everything is in the right place at the right time isn't as important, but in constructed at least, he just kind of feels clunky. His ability and his signature card stop things from dying, and at the end of the day, you're not really scared of things dying too much in constructed, and even in draft a lot of the time, because you like the mobility of having the stuff dead, so you can place it back out again. And that's all he brings. That's literally all he has. So there are definitely better heroes out there. One of which is Chen. He's in B. I kind of want to put Chen in A, but honestly, there are just so many good green heroes in A that I had to relegate Chen to B. Chen is really nice against enemies that are running nice big enemy creeps that you can just take over and turn the game on its head. And his signature card is actually really nice for swinging the game, but at mana round 7, being able to just make stuff damage immune doesn't always mean you're going to win, because there are things like Condemn with Annihilation for 6 mana that just rips straight through it. So for that reason, and for a couple of other reasons, like all the good green heroes in A, which you'll see when I finish this list, Chen's in B. Darkseer though, he's in C. He's one of the heroes that are worse than Chen. His Surge is really nice to have if you play him in the mana round 5, because you can drop him into a lane where you need to move a hero from, but then your Darkseer is abandoned in that lane. He's got decent stats, 5 attack is some of the highest in green, 9 health is one of the lowest in green, but then his signature card Iron Shell just gives you 3 Retaliate for 4 mana. Sure, that's kind of okay, but you can never really guarantee that damage. It's just kind of annoying to play. So Darkseer, you're in C. Moving on to the best of the green heroes, you probably won't be surprised about this one, it's Drow Ranger. She's an S. She gives everyone +1 attack on your side, and Gust is 4 mana silence all enemy heroes in a lane. I don't need to say much more, Gust can just shut down an opponent's lane for 4 mana, which means you can then cast other things and they're completely done for. Just try not to put her in your first 3 heroes and have her die repeatedly, you'll be fine. Next up we have Enchantress, the first of our A green heroes. She's just nice and tanky. With 4 attack, 8 health, and regen 2, she's basically a 4/10, but then she regens herself and her allied neighbours every single round. Verdant Refuge, her signature card, is probably the weaker of these green heroes in A, but if you can get 2 of them down in a lane, all your creeps have 2 armour, which means enemy creeps don't do any damage, and your allied heroes also have 2 armour, which is basically turning them into Axe. Next up we've got Farthen, the basic creep hero. He's down in D. Prowler used to be kind of good, but it's a 0/6, so it's just so easy to kill now. Prowler is his signature card. So Farthen himself, 4/0/10, and giving 1 armor to allied neighbours is relatively nice. It's basically just a bad version of Treant Protector, who we'll see later. But yeah, it's just that signature card now. It just doesn't feel very good. Having a 0 attack, 6 health that just gives 1 armor, unless you've got a Mists of Avernus, it just doesn't feel very nice. It's basically normally used to just make your board wider. Lycan is next, and he's an A. Lycan is one of the heroes you actually get free with the game, and he's very, very strong. 4/0/10, and his Savage Wolf, if it survives 1 turn, becomes a 5/0/3, if not higher. So really nice to have. These ramping creeps are really good, and his Savage Wolf is probably the best of them. So when coupled with some of the other green spells and green heroes, you can start to get a little bit crazy with those guys. Also, he gives +2 attack to his allied neighbours, which means your creeps next to Lycan kill enemy creeps in 1 hit, which is really nice to have. Next up, we've got Magnus. He is just nice to have. I like Magnus in many of my green decks. He's a 4, 1 armor, 9 health. So 4 attack, 1 armor, 9 health. Green hero, which just means he can beat through a lot of other things. 1-on-1, he'll beat any of the 4, 0, 10 green heroes because he has armor, which reduces all of their attacks down to 3. Of course, they will both die at the same time, but he'll be ahead in terms of damage. But that's not the biggest thing about Magnus. I really like Magnus' signature card. Empower, giving you +3 attack and +3 cleave, is fantastic on Magnus, but it doesn't state green hero. So you can just place it on any hero. Giving Axe up to 10 attack with 3 cleave is nuts. Giving Ursa cleave makes his passive even better. And so on and so forth. You can give it to things like Crystal Maiden, so they become a 5 attack, 5 health. With 3 cleave, she's suddenly actually a threat. There are so many good ways of using Empower. It's basically just a much, much, much better version of Iron Shell from Darkseer. So, really, really like Magnus. I play him an awful lot, and you should too. Omni Knight is the next hero in A, 5 attack, 0 armor and 12 health, with his ability to heal allies. He's the one that sort of sits out as the odd one in the group. He's basically not a 4-0-10 or equivalent with Magnus, but he does still have a 4 mana card which regens allies in your lane, which is a little bit ridiculous. 2 regen on all your allies so long as your hero is there. It's a little bit crazy. I feel like Omni Knight doesn't synergize as well as the other heroes, so I tend not to use him as much because he doesn't synergize so well with green. But if you were just putting green in as a 2-of, you could quite easily have like Omni Knight and Magnus or Omni Knight and Drow Ranger in your deck and focus on other things, and he'd fit in perfectly. Next up, we have Rix. Again, contender for the worst hero in the game. 3 attack, 0 armor, and 7 health, with his ability to come back every turn and continue to feed. And then we mentioned his signature card already is a 5 mana silence 1 unit. That just doesn't stack up compared to Drow. So, I'm sorry Rix, but you're in D. And if Outworld Devourer isn't the worst hero in the game, it's probably you. Next up, we have Treant Protector, our final green A hero. I really like Treant. I think he's probably the second best of these A tiers. I think my personal list, if I was going to order them, it would go, how would it go? Probably Magnus, because I really like Magnus. Then Treant Protector, then Lycan, then Enchantress, then Omni Knight. That would be my order. So Treant's definitely up there. Mainly because his signature card is really nice. So having Savage Wolves feels good, but having a 6 health creep that you can just drop that does 2 damage, so it kills an enemy melee creep in 2 turns, and then stays alive for another turn to do 2 damage to the next melee enemy creep. Basically, a lot of value in Artifact is generated by how much they can deal with melee creeps, because they're the constant threat, right? So it can do that, as well as giving you 1 extra mana for those 3 turns, is really nice to have. And then, of course, if they're next to Treant, they have +2 armor, which means they never die to that melee creep. So you've permanently got +1 armor, so long as it's not a hero or a bigger creep spawning opposite them. So one of the best green decks is Ramp, and having extra mana and Ramp is kind of the name of the game. So Treant fits in really nicely in A here. Our final hero of the entire tier list is another one I really enjoy playing, as I said earlier. It's Viper. So Viper is another 4-0-10 green hero, but his ability isn't really to protect his allies. His ability is if he gets damaged, the enemy loses 1 attack. I kind of adore this. It's really not that great, but I really like it. I think my favourite combo with this so far, I had it in draft along with the Grand Melee, which gives everyone cleave so long as there's a red hero in that lane. So I did that, and the enemy had 3 units attacking my Viper. I just kept him alive as long as possible until they all had 0 attack. Viper is a pretty decent meme, but I think he works quite nicely in that one particular deck where you're removing enemy stats. I'll show it off later. It's definitely not high tier. As a deck, it's probably like B or C tier at least, but that's why Viper here is in B. Also, his signature card, Viper Strike, deals 2 damage at the beginning of the deployment phase every turn to the person you put it on, so there's no immediate damage, which is kind of annoying, but I just use it as a 3 mana get an upkeep kill on this hero. I make sure the enemy hero is going to be at 2 or less health, and then I put Viper Strike on them to make sure that it's an upkeep kill, keep them out of the game for an extra 1 turn. It's actually a really nice way of using it. So, that about covers all of the heroes currently in Artifact. We're about to add a huge number of exceedingly clever players to the game, you guys, so I will undoubtedly need to redo this tier list soon. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on that. As always, I've been Devok of the Artificers Guild, and I'll see you next time.